In the spring of 1974, a group of farmers digging a well in rural China struck something hard beneath the earth. Not rock, not water, but the head of a clay soldier, staring blankly up at them after centuries of silence. That accidental discovery would unravel one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of all time: the Terracotta Army, a legion of over 8,000 life-sized statues buried in the shadows of Emperor Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. But here's the chilling part: these aren't just sculptures. Each warrior has a unique face, a distinct expression, as if frozen in time mid-battle. Why would an emperor commission such an army, not of flesh and blood, but of clay and paint? And what were they truly meant to protect, or perhaps to conceal? Picture this: row after row of soldiers, chariots, even horses, stretching across vast underground corridors, their weapons once sharp enough to draw blood. The scale is staggering enough to fill a modern-day sports stadium, but the deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. Some figures stand ready for combat, while others kneel as if in prayer. Their hollow eyes seem to hold secrets, whispers of a purpose far beyond guarding a tomb. Historians have long assumed they were meant to serve Qin Shi Huang in the afterlife, a celestial battalion for eternity. Yet what if their true role was something stranger, something even the emperor's closest advisors dared not speak aloud? This is where the story twists. The Terracotta Army isn't just a monument to power, it's a riddle wrapped in clay. Think about it: why place an entire army underground, facing east toward the rising sun? Why hide them so meticulously, only to leave their weapons, real, deadly weapons, scattered among them? And most haunting of all, why were the artisans who built them allegedly buried alive with their creations? The answers might rewrite everything we know about ancient China's most enigmatic ruler. So let's step into the shadows of Xi'an, where the dirt still clings to these silent sentinels, and uncover the truth behind their unblinking gaze. Because what we're about to reveal isn't just history, it's a secret 2,000 years in the making. The farmers' shovels hit something unyielding that spring morning in Linton County. Not the cool rush of groundwater they'd hoped for, but the curve of a clay ear, then a shoulder, emerging from the dirt like a man drowning in reverse. As they scraped away more soil, an entire face materialized: high cheekbones, stern brows, its painted colors still faintly visible after 2 millennia underground. Word spread through the village like wildfire, bringing local officials who brushed away centuries of dust to reveal not just one soldier, but an entire battalion frozen mid-march. The scale of their find only grew more staggering as archaeologists arrived. Horses with flared nostrils caught in silent whinnies, bronze swords still gleaming beneath oxidization, chariots with intricate wooden wheels that crumbled to dust at the touch. What made their discovery extraordinary wasn't just the craftsmanship, it was the eerie individuality. No two faces matched. Some warriors wore topknots, others goatees, some smirked, others scowled as if burdened by eternity itself. Each detail whispered secrets of the artisans who sculpted them. The fingerprints pressed into wet clay, the strands of horsehair still embedded in a statue's tail. By summer, teams would uncover pits spanning over 14,000 square meters, yet even then, they barely scratched the surface. The world watched in awe as China's past erupted into the present, one painstaking brushstroke at a time. But here's what history books often gloss over: those first moments were pure chaos. Farmers initially thought they disturbed a temple or maybe a long-dead general's tomb. No one imagined they'd stumbled upon an entire subterranean city of the dead, its streets lined not with buildings but regiments. When archaeologists X-rayed the site, the ground practically shimmered with metallic echoes, not just from weapons but from coins, jewelry, even an entire half-scale replica of the emperor's palace hidden deeper underground. This wasn't just a burial complex, it was a mirror of Qin Shi Huang's empire, cast in clay and sealed away before Rome had even built its Colosseum. The greatest archaeological discovery of the 20th century began with a single fractured terracotta eyelid staring blindly up through the roots of a persimmon tree. Emperor Qin Shi Huang didn't just fear death, he waged war against it. By the time he unified China's warring states in 221 BCE, proclaiming himself the first emperor, he'd already become consumed by a singular fixation: cheating the grave. His reign wasn't just about conquest, it was a desperate race against time, a man grasping at eternity with both hands. Consider the sheer scale of his paranoia. He dispatched fleets to mythical islands in search of immortality elixirs, employed alchemists to distill mercury into life-extending potions, and ordered his palace floors to be painted with celestial maps so he could walk among the stars. Yet beneath this grandeur lurked a terror so profound it would literally reshape the earth beneath his feet. The terracotta army wasn't merely a burial accessory, it was the centerpiece of a delusion. Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum complex sprawled across nearly 20 square miles, a mirror of his empire carved into the underworld. Rivers of mercury simulated flowing water, crossbow traps waited to strike intruders, and the stars themselves were said to be etched into the ceiling. But the 8,000 clay soldiers guarding him, they were something far more calculated. Ancient texts reveal the emperor's nightmare. In death, he believed the vengeful spirits of those he'd conquered, the slain soldiers, the executed scholars, would rise against him in the afterlife. His solution, an army of his own, sculpted not from living men who could betray him, but from obedient clay. Each warrior's unique face may hold a darker truth. Some historians suggest they're portraits of actual soldiers, their likenesses captured so their souls could be bound to eternal service. Here's what makes his obsession even more chilling. Qin Shi Huang didn't just prepare for the afterlife, he tried to conquer it. The terracotta army faces east, the direction from which his most formidable enemies once came. Their weapons weren't ceremonial, they were battle-ready, some still sharp enough to draw blood today. Even the layout mirrors a real military formation: vanguard, main force, and reserves, all poised for war beyond death's door. But the most telling detail: the artisans who built this eternal garrison were allegedly sealed alive within the tomb, ensuring no one could reveal its secrets or recreate its power. In the end, the emperor's quest for immortality may have backfired spectacularly. The mercury he consumed likely hastened his demise, and his dynasty collapsed within years of his death. Yet his terracotta legions endure, frozen in their silent vigil, less a testament to eternal power than to the terrifying depths of a man who refused to surrender to the inevitable. Standing in pit number 1, the largest of the 3 burial chambers, feels like gazing into a ghostly parade ground. The numbers alone defy comprehension: row upon row of over 6,000 clay soldiers, each standing at attention in 11 corridors wider than city streets. But that's just the beginning. Scattered across the complex are 2,000 more warriors, plus 130 chariots hitched to 670 horses, their legs tensed as if ready to charge at the crack of a whip. This wasn't just an army, it was an exact replica of the imperial war machine, frozen in perfect battle order. What's even more astonishing is the hierarchy woven into their ranks. At the front, 3 rows of crossbowmen kneel with weapons drawn, the vanguard meant to absorb the first assault. Behind them, columns of infantry clutch 18-foot spears, their armor made from stone plates so finely carved they mimic leather. Towering above the rest are the generals, identified by their ornate headgear and tasseled armor, their hands resting on sword pommels with an air of quiet authority. Then there are the charioteers, each standing beside horses whose flared nostrils and muscular hindquarters suggest breeds strong enough to pull wooden chariots into battle. Every figure plays a role, every position calculated right down to the lone figure of a kneeling archer, discovered with his thumb still pressed against an invisible bowstring. But it's the faces that haunt you. Lean in close and no two are alike. Some have broad, flat noses typical of northern China. others were the delicate features of southern artisans. There are young recruits with smooth cheeks and grizzled veterans whose brows are creased with frown lines. The sculptors even included asymmetrical details, a drooping eyelid here, a slightly crooked tooth there, as if capturing living men mid-breath. Forensic experts have catalogued at least 8 distinct face shapes, suggesting the army wasn't just imagined, but modeled on real soldiers. Some historians speculate these were portraits of Qin Shi Huang's actual troops, their likenesses immortalized to bind their spirits to his service forever. The craftsmanship reveals even darker layers. Fingernails are carved with crescent moons, belts tied in precise knots used by Qin dynasty infantry. Horse bridles bear tiny bronze buckles that would have jingled in battle. Yet all this realism hides an eerie contradiction. These warriors were never meant to be seen. Their paint, once vibrant enough to mimic flesh, flaked off within hours of exposure to air. The bronze weapons they held weren't dull replicas but razor-sharp swords, some still bearing grind marks from their final sharpening. Why spend decades perfecting details only to bury them in darkness? The answer might lie in the emperor's obsession with control. Every stitch of armor, every strand of a horse's tail was a declaration. Even in death, his dominion over reality remained absolute. Modern technology peels back another secret. Thermal imaging shows the kilns used to fire these statues reached temperatures hot enough to warp metal, meaning artisans didn't just sculpt the army, they industrialized it. Pits near the site contain molds for ears, noses, even armor plates, suggesting mass production. But here's the twist: after assembly, each figure was hand-finished to erase any uniformity. The emperor's demand for both quantity and individuality created a paradox, an assembly line of uniqueness. Walking among them now, you don't see an art project. You witness the fingerprints of thousands of anonymous craftsmen, their identities erased by history just as surely as they erased the sameness in their creations. This level of detail raises a chilling question. If such effort went into the visible army, what unimaginable treasures or horrors still lie buried in the unexcavated heart of the tomb? The terracotta soldiers may be just the outermost ring of a labyrinth designed to guard something far more precious, or something the emperor dared not let the world see. The most widely accepted explanation for the terracotta army's existence lies in the ancient Chinese belief in the afterlife, a realm where emperors would rule just as they had in life. Qin Shi Huang didn't just want to be remembered, he demanded an eternal kingdom, complete with subjects, palaces, and most crucially, an army to defend his divine authority. This wasn't mere vanity. In the spiritual worldview of the time, death was simply a change of address. The emperor's soul would need protection from vengeful spirits, enemies he'd slaughtered during his conquests, scholars he'd buried alive for dissent, even restless ancestors seeking retribution. The clay soldiers, then, were his insurance policy against cosmic rebellion. But what makes this theory so compelling is how it represents a seismic shift in burial customs. Centuries before Qin Shi Huang, Chinese rulers practiced zunzang, the sacrificial burial of living servants, soldiers, and concubines to accompany nobles into the afterlife. Archaeologists have uncovered Shang dynasty tombs surrounded by mass graves, their skeletons still clutching ritual weapons. By the Warring States period, some nobles had begun substituting humans with wooden or straw effigies, a small mercy, but one that hinted at changing attitudes. Qin Shi Huang's innovation was both brutal and bizarrely progressive. An entire army of clay substitutes, each imbued with enough lifelike detail to spiritually activate them. The symbolism here runs deeper than mere protection. The terracotta army scale mirrors the real-world military structure that forged China's first unified empire. Their eastward orientation isn't random, it's a direct challenge to the 6 rival kingdoms Qin Shi Huang crushed, their ghosts now held at bay by an undying garrison. Even their weapons tell a story. Unlike ritual objects found in earlier tombs, these were functional swords and crossbows, some with inscriptions naming imperial armories. This wasn't theater, it was a metaphysical declaration. The emperor wasn't just preparing for the afterlife, he was extending his reign into eternity, with terracotta standing in for flesh and blood. Yet contradictions emerge. If the army's sole purpose was spiritual defense, why hide them so completely? Earlier noble tombs prominently displayed sacrificial offerings as warnings to grave robbers and rivals. The terracotta army, by contrast, was concealed beneath layers of earth, its true scale unknown even to later Han Dynasty historians. Perhaps the answer lies in Qin Shi Huang's paranoia. These weren't just guards, they were a secret weapon, hidden until the moment his enemies breached the tomb's defenses. Or maybe their burial reflects a darker fear, that the clay soldiers themselves could become dangerous if disturbed, their hollow eyes awakening to something beyond human control. Modern archaeologists note another chilling parallel. Near the tomb's outer walls, they've found mass graves containing skeletons with crushed limbs, likely the very craftsmen who built the army. In death as in life, Qin Shi Huang left nothing to chance. Even the creators of his eternal guardians became part of the tomb's security system, their silenced voices joining the ranks of clay sentinels. The terracotta army may have been a leap forward from human sacrifice, but its creation was still drenched in blood. What unsettles scholars most isn't just the army's purpose, but what it reveals about the emperor's psyche. A man so terrified of oblivion that he turned conquest into a religion and clay into an everlasting sword. Beyond their spiritual purpose, the terracotta army served as a chilling proclamation, a final act of psychological warfare carved into clay. Every detail, from the razor-sharp bronze swords to the mathematically precise formations, broadcast a single message. Qin Shi Huang's authority transcended death itself. Imagine being a rival warlord or rebellious noble in that era, hearing whispers of this hidden legion. Even after the emperor's passing, the mere knowledge of 8,000 silent soldiers standing guard would have been enough to freeze dissent in its tracks. The weapons alone tell a story of calculated intimidation. Archaeologists discovered over 40,000 bronze arrowheads, each with aerodynamic ridges mirroring those used by Qin's living armies. Crossbow triggers were machined to tolerances so precise they could be swapped between weapons, a feat of standardization unmatched elsewhere in the ancient world. These weren't symbolic props, they were painstaking recreations of the very arms that had conquered 6 warring states. By burying them alongside his clay regiments, Qin Shi Huang transformed his tomb into an arsenal, ensuring potential challengers knew his military might remain ever present even in the afterlife. Formations reveal even deeper layers of symbolism. The vanguard's kneeling archers mirror battlefield tactics described in surviving military treatises, units trained to loose volleys before retreating behind infantry lines. Chariots cluster where they'd be most effective against cavalry, while officers stand precisely 18 paces apart, the optimal distance for relaying commands in the din of battle. This wasn't just art, it was a frozen snapshot of the war machine that had unified China, preserved like a fossil in clay. Perhaps most telling is what's missing. Unlike earlier noble tombs filled with ceremonial jade blades, every weapon here was combat-ready. Swords retained their deadly balance, spearheads their piercing taper. Even the chariot wheels were fitted with functional shock absorbers, oiled leather strips between wooden spokes. The message was unmistakable. This army didn't exist to perform rituals. It existed to fight, to conquer, just as its living counterparts had. Modern historians see parallels with nuclear deterrence, an unseen force so overwhelmingly real it prevents rebellion through sheer psychological weight. Qin Shi Huang didn't just want to be remembered as powerful. He engineered a legacy where dissidents would glance over their shoulders for centuries, wondering if those hollow eyes might one day blink. The clay soldiers' greatest weapon wasn't their swords. It was the paralyzing idea that somewhere beneath the earth, an emperor's wrath still marched in perfect lockstep, never sheathing its blade. Yet the symbolism cuts both ways. For all its menace, the army also betrays vulnerability. Why bury such overwhelming force unless you fear your enemies might pursue you beyond the grave? The very act of commissioning this eternal garrison reveals a paradox: a ruler so powerful he reshaped nations, yet so terrified of losing control that he built monuments to his own anxiety. In the end, the Terracotta army stands as history's most elaborate security blanket, its bronze edges gleaming not with strength, but with the shimmer of a man who could rule the living world yet remained helpless before the dark. The eastward gaze of the Terracotta army isn't just a quirk of placement, it's a deliberate alignment with the cosmos, a silent dialogue between earth and heavens. Ancient Chinese cosmology held that the east was the realm of the rising sun, the direction of renewal and celestial power. By positioning his clay legions to face the dawn, Qin Shi Huang wasn't merely guarding against earthly foes, he was harnessing the very energy of the universe. This wasn't just an army of clay, it was a spiritual battery, each soldier a conduit for Kai, the life force that flowed through all things. Feng Shui masters would recognize the tomb's layout as a masterpiece of geomancy. The soldiers cluster near Mount Lai, a site long believed to pulse with dragon veins, invisible channels of earth energy. Their formation mirrors the Big Dipper constellation, a celestial pattern revered as the chariot of the gods. Even the Mercury rivers winding through the tomb's depths echo ancient Taoist alchemy, where liquid silver symbolized the union of yin and yang. Every detail suggests the emperor wasn't just building a mausoleum, he was constructing a machine to transform death into divinity. Astrology adds another layer. The Qin dynasty's official calendar revolved around Jupiter's 12-year orbit, with each year linked to an earthly branch, an animal sign governing fate. Remarkably, the Terracotta army's pits align with these celestial divisions. Pit 1 corresponds to the tiger, symbolizing martial prowess. Pit 2 mirrors the dragon, representing imperial authority. This wasn't random. By embedding astrological codes into his underground fortress, Qin Shi Huang sought to bind his afterlife reign to the rhythms of the stars, ensuring eternity moved to his timetable. The soldiers' hollow interiors hint at an even more esoteric purpose. Some scholars propose these cavities weren't just kiln-firing practicalities, they were spiritual vessels. Ancient rituals often involved placing scrolls inscribed with incantations inside statues to animate them. Could each warrior contain a hidden prayer, a scrap of parchment charged with the emperor's will? Modern scans haven't yet confirmed this, but the theory aligns with Qin Shi Huang's obsession with ritual magic. His terracotta host might literally have been stuffed with spells, turning 8,000 silent sentinels into a chorus of whispered invocations. Yet the most haunting spiritual detail lies in what's missing. Despite their weapons and armor, not a single soldier wears a helmet. This defies all military logic until you consult Han Dynasty texts describing the afterlife as a realm where the brave need no head protection. By stripping his army of helmets, the emperor wasn't just declaring their fearlessness. He was signaling their transition into the spirit world, where mortal rules no longer applied. These weren't just sculptures, they were passports stamped for the underworld, their blank eyes fixed on a horizon only the dead could see. Today, infrared imaging reveals something astonishing. The tomb's soil contains unusually high mercury levels, just as ancient chronicles described. But here's the twist. The highest concentrations trace a path leading directly to the Terracotta army's formation, as if the liquid metal were a shimmering leash tethering the clay soldiers to their master. Science confirms what legend long suggested, that Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum wasn't just a burial site, but a colossal alchemical diagram with mercury for ink and warriors for brushstrokes. The Terracotta army may well be the world's most elaborate ritual object, a prayer molded into clay and fired in the kilns of desperation, its true purpose not to guard a corpse but to transmute a mortal man into something beyond time. Deep beneath the emperor's sprawling necropolis, archaeologists have detected rivers of liquid mercury, not scattered droplets, but entire flowing channels mirroring the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. This wasn't decoration. Qin Shi Huang had become obsessed with alchemical texts claiming mercury could dissolve the barriers between life and death, transforming flesh into immortal jade. His tomb wasn't just a burial chamber, it was a laboratory where science and superstition blurred into something terrifying. Consider the emperor's final years. Court records describe him growing increasingly frail, his hands shaking from what historians now suspect was chronic mercury poisoning. Yet instead of recoiling from the toxin, he consumed it deliberately, mixed into potions by court alchemists who promised eternal life. These weren't mere charlatans, they were pioneers of proto-chemistry, distilling cinnabar ore in kilns that left metallic vapors hanging over the palace like ghostly breath. The same alchemists likely engineered the tomb's liquid mercury rivers, creating a subterranean circuit where the emperor's corpse would theoretically bathe in perpetual transformation. Now connect the dots to the Terracotta army. Their placement isn't random, they guard the eastern approach to the tomb, the direction associated with birth and renewal in Chinese cosmology. But here's the twist. Infrared scans show mercury concentrations spike along the army's formation lines, as if the soldiers were stationed to somehow channel or contain the toxic flow. Were they spiritual guardians or components in a vast alchemical array? Some scholars suggest the army's hollow interiors weren't just kiln-firing necessities, they may have housed mercury-filled vessels, turning each warrior into a kind of mystical battery. The emperor's desperation escalated beyond his tomb. He dispatched fleets of ships bearing hundreds of young men and women into the Eastern Sea, ordering them to find the mythical Pinglai Island where immortals dwelled. When these expeditions returned empty-handed, the messengers were executed for failing a cycle that repeated until the coastline ran red with their blood. Simultaneously, his alchemists experimented with more gruesome ingredients. Powdered jade mixed into wine believed to preserve the body, elixirs containing arsenic and gold, even potions distilled from rare mushrooms that induced hallucinations of celestial realms. The Terracotta army's true purpose might lie at the intersection of these obsessions. Ancient Han texts describe Qin Shi Huang's terror of corpse demons, malevolent spirits that could hijack a body after death. His solution, a clay army infused with mercury's transformative properties, positioned to create a spiritual Faraday cage around his tomb. The soldiers' weapons weren't just for show. Bronze was considered a sacred metal capable of warding off evil. Their eastward alignment may have been less about defense and more about harvesting cosmic energy, turning the entire complex into a rebirth engine. Modern science lends eerie credibility to these theories. Soil tests reveal the tomb's mercury levels are 20 times higher than nearby areas, with distribution patterns suggesting deliberate hydraulic engineering. More chillingly, the Terracotta army's paint contained rare minerals like malachite and azurite, substances alchemists used to fix volatile elements. These weren't just pigments, they were ingredients in a recipe for immortality, baked into the statue's very skin. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in the artisan's fate. Mass graves near the site contained skeletons with high mercury concentrations in their bones, not from poisoning, but from handling liquid metal daily. These craftsmen didn't just sculpt soldiers, they may have been unwitting participants in the emperor's final experiment, their bodies absorbing the toxin as they worked, becoming living filters for his madness. The Terracotta army endures not just as art, but as the shadow of a man who tried to conquer death itself, and in the process turned his legacy into a warning etched in clay and poison. The pristine bronze weapons found with the Terracotta army tell only half the story because most of the 8,000 soldiers originally held arms that vanished without a trace. Archaeologists estimate only 1 in 10 statues still clutches its weapon, leaving gaping voids where spears and swords should be. This isn't random decay. The missing arms follow a chilling pattern. Infantry missing swords, crossbowmen lacking triggers, charioteers without whips. Something or someone systematically disarmed this eternal garrison. One theory points to history's first recorded tomb raider, Zhang Yu, who revolted against the Qin dynasty just a few years after the emperor's death. Ancient texts describe him looting the mausoleum, burning its above-ground structures, and allegedly taking 300,000 weapons to equip his rebel army. The timeline fits. Many weapon shafts show clean breaks at the grip, as if pried from clenched terracotta fists. Bronze was precious, melted down. Those swords could arm living soldiers for real battles. But here's the catch. Zhang Yu's supposed raid occurred 2 centuries before the tomb was sealed completely. If he took the weapons, why leave behind any at all? A darker possibility emerges from Qin Shi Huang's own edicts. After unifying China, he ordered all civilian weapons confiscated and recast as ceremonial bells, a literal disarmament of potential rebels. Applying that logic to his afterlife army raises a spine-tingling question. What if the missing weapons weren't stolen, but deliberately removed to prevent the terracotta soldiers from turning against their master? Ancient Chinese folk beliefs held that objects buried with the dead could gain spiritual agency. An armed clay army left unattended for eternity might develop loyalties of its own. The emperor, ever the control freak, may have ordered their weapons ritually withdrawn after burial, leaving just enough arms to deter intruders but not enough to stage a coup in the underworld. Forensic clues support this. Some empty hands show tool marks where weapons were carefully extracted, not torn out. In Pit 2, a cluster of officers still hold swords, but their blades were intentionally bent before burial, a practice seen in ritual sacrifices to kill objects spiritually. Even more telling are the weapon racks found empty but undamaged, their wooden frames still standing after millennia. If looters had stormed the tomb, they'd have toppled these racks in their haste. Their neat arrangement suggests a solemn, orderly disarmament ceremony. The most provocative evidence comes from the soil itself. Spectrometer readings reveal concentrated bronze particles around statues' feet, exactly where dust would settle if blades were slowly withdrawn upward. But there's no matching metal residue at pit entrances, ruling out large-scale theft. Instead, the distribution hints at methodical removal by someone who knew the army's layout intimately, perhaps the same artisans who built it, fulfilling one final, secret order before being sealed in their own mass graves. This leads to a haunting conclusion. The terracotta army's missing weapons might represent history's most elaborate fail-safe. Qin Shi Huang, who spent his life eliminating threats, could never fully trust even his own creations. In the end, his eternal guardians were left just strong enough to defend, but too weak to rebel, a clay army with bronze teeth but no bite. Beneath the excavated pits where the terracotta army stands frozen in formation lies an even greater enigma. The undisturbed heart of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum, a sealed chamber rumored to hold wonders and horrors beyond imagination. Ground-penetrating radar has painted a tantalizing portrait of what remains hidden. A sprawling underground palace complex, its walls lined with mercury-coated rivers, its ceilings inlaid with celestial maps, and its corridors possibly stacked with treasures and texts that could rewrite history. Yet the central tomb itself, believed to house the emperor's sarcophagus, remains untouched, not just by modern hands, but by time itself. The reason? Ancient chronicles warn of deadly traps, crossbows rigged to fire at intruders, rivers of liquid mercury designed to poison the air, and modern tests confirm dangerously high toxin levels in the soil, as if the tomb itself refuses to surrender its secrets. The radar maps reveal anomalies that defy simple explanation. One chamber shows a dense, metallic mass matching descriptions of Qin Shi Huang's bronze sarcophagus, said to float on a sea of mercury. Nearby, rectangular voids could contain anything from terracotta bureaucrats, an administrative army to manage the emperor's afterlife empire, to libraries of bamboo scrolls detailing lost philosophies his infamous book-burning sought to erase. Most intriguing are the acoustic chambers, hollow spaces engineered to amplify specific frequencies. Were these designed for rituals to summon deities or to create an eternal echo of the emperor's voice? Then there's Pit 4, an excavation site abandoned under mysterious circumstances. Workers in the 1980s reportedly hit a layer of jade tiles, then stopped abruptly when their tools came back coated in a strange red powder. Lab tests identified it as cinnabar, mercury ore, but mixed with an unknown binding agent resembling blood. Local archaeologists whisper about terracotta figures unlike anything yet seen, perhaps alchemists frozen mid-experiment, or even statues of the emperor's executed scholars, their faces contorted in silent screams. The greatest mystery lurks beneath the tomb's northern quadrant, where thermal imaging detects a vast, square chamber with no entrance. Its temperature fluctuates independently of the surrounding earth, as if something inside generates its own heat. Could this be the legendary halls of immortality, where Qin Shi Huang's alchemists attempted to synthesize the elixir of eternal life? Or does it hold something more unsettling, a backup army, perhaps, or a second, more elaborate terracotta replica of the emperor himself, designed to deceive tomb raiders and malevolent spirits alike? What makes these unopened spaces so electrifying isn't just the potential treasures, it's the chance to finally understand the army's true purpose. Inscriptions found near Pit 3 reference a celestial muster, suggesting the soldiers were meant to be activated by cosmic events. Fragments of star charts recovered from nearby pits align with records of a supernova visible in 212 BCE, the year the emperor began his tomb. Were the terracotta warriors part of an astrological weapon, their souls linked to constellations that could be summoned like a divine militia, until the central tomb is opened, an operation China's government permits only under the most rigorous conditions, if at all the answers remain locked away. But the radar doesn't lie. There are corridors down there no human has walked in 22 centuries, rooms where the air itself may still carry the scent of lacquer and molten bronze. The terracotta army might be just the outer sentinels of a labyrinth designed to guard something far more extraordinary, not just an emperor's corpse, but the blueprint of his madness, preserved in mercury and stone, waiting for the moment when modern courage finally matches ancient ambition. The lifelike realism of the terracotta army's faces, their individualized expressions, anatomical precision, even the subtle wrinkles on a general's forehead, has long fueled an incendiary debate. Could Greek artists have influenced their creation? At first glance, the idea seems improbable. Qin Shi Huang's China was famously isolationist, its Great Wall literally built to keep outsiders at bay. Yet dig deeper, and the timeline reveals a tantalizing overlap. Just decades before the emperor's death, Alexander the Great's conquests had carried Hellenistic art deep into Central Asia, with Greek-style sculptures appearing as far east as Afghanistan's Ai Khanum. Trade routes like the Proto-Silk Road already pulsed with exchanges, not just of goods but of ideas. Could a trickle of Mediterranean artistry have seeped into Xian's workshops? The evidence hides in the clay itself. Before the Qin dynasty, Chinese funerary statues were small, stylized, and symbolic. Think miniature servants with cookie-cutter faces. Suddenly, around 220 BCE, artisans produce 8,000 hyper-realistic figures overnight. The leap feels astronomical unless outside knowledge catalyzed it. Forensic studies reveal the army's construction methods share eerie parallels with Greek techniques. Both cultures used coiled clay strips to build torsos, layered slip to texture skin, and poured molten metal into pre-cast molds for fine details. Even the soldiers' proportions follow the Greek canon of proportions, with head-to-body ratios matching classical statues like the Doraphoros, but here's where it gets contentious. Bronze artifacts unearthed near the tomb complex show traces of Eurasian steppe motifs, griffins, centaur-like creatures that don't belong to traditional Chinese iconography. More startling, a 2,300-year-old European mitochondrial DNA sample found in a Xinjiang burial site, proving Westerners reached China's doorstep during the Qin era. Could Greek artisans captured in Alexander's eastern campaigns have been traded or wandered into imperial workshops? Ancient records mention foreign craftsmen at Qin Shi Huang's court, though their origins remain unspecified. Skeptics counter with China's own sculptural evolution. By the late Warring States period, bronze casting had achieved breathtaking realism, as seen in intricately detailed ritual vessels. The terracotta army's sudden scale might reflect imperial resources, not outside influence. Yet even this argument holds a twist. Recent pigment analysis shows some soldiers wore purple, a color traditionally associated with Mediterranean royalty, produced from rare shellfish dyes that traveled trade routes. Their armor's overlapping stone plates mirror Greek linothorax designs more than indigenous lamella styles. The truth likely lies in between. Qin Shi Huang's artisans didn't copy Greek art, they hybridized it. The warriors' almond-shaped eyes and flat noses remain distinctly Chinese, while their lifelike musculature suggests absorbed knowledge. This wasn't imitation, it was cultural alchemy, the kind that happens when ideas collide across continents. The terracotta army's greatness may stem from its very duality. An emperor's paranoia forged in clay, refined by whispers from worlds he tried so hard to shut out. Their silent faces hold not just the secrets of China's first empire, but proof that even the most isolated societies are never truly alone. Buried in the same complex as the terracotta army, Emperor Qin Shi Huang's bronze chariots gleam with a craftsmanship so intricate it defies belief. Yet they stand in stark contrast to the clay soldiers guarding them. Each chariot, made from over 3,000 individually cast bronze pieces, features windows that slide on hidden grooves, reins threaded with silver, and wheels that still turn smoothly after millennia. These weren't mass-produced, they were one-of-a-kind masterpieces designed to carry the emperor's spirit in celestial splendor. So why lavish such painstaking detail on chariots while churning out thousands of nearly identical terracotta infantry? The answer might lie in the emperor's ruthless pragmatism. Jade burial suits found in noble tombs of the era reveal another layer of this contradiction. High-ranking officials were interred in suits stitched with thousands of jade plaques, a material so revered it was called the Stone of Heaven. The suits took years to craft, each plaque painstakingly threaded with gold or silk to form a second skin that would ward off decay. Yet none of Qin Shi Huang's warriors wear jade. They weren't even painted with its signature green pigment. The disconnect is jarring. The emperor buried his elites in sacred stone, his charioteers in precious metal, but his soldiers in cheap, unfired clay. Look closer and the differences become even more telling. The bronze chariots were fired only once, their seams welded with such precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate the technique. The terracotta soldiers, by contrast, were fired twice, first for the body, then again after attaching limbs. This wasn't just a shortcut, it was an assembly line approach to immortality. The chariots and jade suits were personal extensions of the emperor's divine body, but the clay army, expendable, replaceable, designed not for glory but for grim utility. The scale tells its own story. Only 2 bronze chariots were ever found, and fewer than 20 complete jade suits exist today. Yet the terracotta army's pits stretch for miles, their numbers dwarfing all other tomb artifacts combined. This wasn't just a difference in resources, it was a statement of priorities. The chariots and suits were about prestige, the clay soldiers were about survival. Every infantryman's face may have been unique, but their purpose was brutally uniform: to form an unbreakable shield between the emperor and the revenge-seeking dead. Perhaps the most revealing clue lies in the materials themselves. Bronze symbolized imperial authority in life, jade guaranteed purity in death, but terracotta. It was the pottery of peasants, the stuff of roof tiles and drainage pipes. By choosing humble clay for his eternal army, Qin Shi Huang made a chilling calculation. Numbers mattered more than nobility. Better 8,000 replaceable pawns than a few exquisite knights. The chariots gleam, the jade glows, but it's the rough, unglazed clay that still stands watch. A reminder that even in the afterlife, the emperor understood the cold arithmetic of power. Among the pits surrounding Qin Shi Huang's tomb, one stands apart, not filled with soldiers, but with figures frozen mid-somersault, their arms outstretched as if catching an unseen audience's applause. This is Pit 7, home to the Terracotta Acrobats, a troupe of 11 life-sized performers whose existence shatters the militaristic image of the emperor's afterlife. Unlike their armored counterparts, these figures wear tight tunics that cling to muscular frames, some balancing on one leg, others posed in handstands that defy gravity even after 2 millennia. Their discovery in 1997 forced archaeologists to ask a startling question. What role did acrobats play in an eternal empire built on war? The answer might lie in Qin Shi Huang's obsession with control, not just over land, but over the very fabric of reality. Ancient records describe lavish palace banquets where acrobats performed death-defying feats to entertain the emperor. But in the afterlife, these performers weren't just distractions, they were spiritual shock absorbers. Han Dynasty texts reference Baxi, ritual performances meant to appease restless spirits through physical spectacle. The acrobats' poses mirror those described in these ceremonies, backbends symbolizing the bridge between worlds, handstands representing the inversion of mortal and divine realms. Their presence suggests the emperor feared not just earthly enemies but cosmic disorder. Yet the pit holds darker clues. Among the acrobats stand hulking strongmen, their bulging biceps and barreled chests carved with anatomical precision. One figure, dubbed the Giant, towers over the others at 6 feet 5 inches, unheard of for the era. Forensic analysis reveals his spine curves unnaturally, as if sculpted from a real sufferer of acromegaly. This wasn't idealized art, it was portraiture of the grotesque. In an era where physical abnormalities were considered omens, these strongmen may have served as spiritual bodyguards, their deformities repelling evil like human gargoyles. The acrobats' positioning deepens the mystery. They cluster near the tomb's outer court, a symbolic space where living officials once waited to petition the emperor. Their proximity implies they weren't just entertainers, but gatekeepers of a sort performing eternal rituals to maintain the boundary between the living world and the underworld. Infrared scans show traces of cinnabar powder around their bases, a mercury compound used in exorcisms. Even their material tells a story. While the warriors were fired from local clay, the acrobat's terracotta contains traces of sand from the Wai River, a substance believed to carry purifying properties. Most haunting are the missing props. Faint impressions in some figures' hands suggest they once held bronze rings, possibly for juggling or ceremonial hoops. Others show wrist grooves where ribbons might have fluttered. These props weren't stolen, they were never interred to begin with. Archaeologists speculate the objects were considered too powerful to bury, that their motions, frozen in eternity, could unleash uncontrollable spiritual energies. The acrobat's empty hands thus become a metaphor for the emperor's dilemma: how to harness cosmic forces without being consumed by them. Modern historians see Pit 7 as Qin Shi Huang's most personal revelation. The soldiers represent his public face, the conqueror, the strategist. But the acrobats, they expose the man behind the myth, a ruler so terrified of chaos that he buried performers to eternally dance on the knife's edge between order and entropy. Their silent performance wasn't for entertainment. It was a desperate prayer carved in clay and baked in fire that the show might never end. The Terracotta Army's defensive formation isn't just a military display, it's a mirror of Qin Shi Huang's unraveling psyche, a man who survived at least 3 documented assassination attempts and spent his final years seeing daggers in every shadow. His paranoia wasn't baseless. In 227 BCE, a disgruntled soldier named Jing Qi nearly killed him with a poison-coated dagger hidden in a map scroll. Another assassin, Gao Jianli, blinded by the emperor's men, attempted to bludgeon him to death with a lead-weighted lute during a musical performance. These weren't just attacks, they were violations, moments when death slipped past layers of bodyguards to whisper in the emperor's ear. Is it any wonder his afterlife army stands with weapons drawn, their formations tighter than any real battlefield would demand? The tomb complex itself reads like a manifesto of terror. Crossbow booby traps weren't placed just at entrances, they lined corridors in overlapping fields of fire, ensuring any intruder would face volleys from multiple angles. Riverbeds of mercury weren't merely symbolic, their toxic fumes created a lethal barrier, a chemical moat against the living and dead alike. Even the Terracotta Army's positioning reflects this siege mentality. Unlike traditional burial retinues placed close to the ruler's coffin, Qin's clay legions are stationed nearly a mile from his central tomb, human shields meant to absorb the first wave of spiritual vengeance before it could reach him. Consider the army's most haunting detail. Their weapons are real, but their armor is stone. This wasn't an artistic choice. Qin Shi Huang's edicts banned civilian armor ownership, fearing rebel uprisings. His terracotta soldiers mirror this policy, armed enough to attack, but deliberately vulnerable, as if the emperor feared his own afterlife garrison might turn against him. The psychological calculus is chilling. Better an army that can't withstand prolonged combat than one that could revolt and overthrow him in the underworld. Even in eternity, he engineered checks and balances against his protectors. The soldier's eastward gaze takes on new meaning when you trace the emperor's deepest fears. Ancient divination texts found near the site describe malefic winds blowing from the east, the direction of his conquered enemies, the realm where disgraced advisors had been executed, the origin point of assassination attempts. By facing his terracotta host toward this spiritual danger zone, Qin wasn't just preparing for battle, he was attempting to stare down the source of his nightmares. Archaeologists note something peculiar. The further east you go in the pits, the more damaged the statues become. Not from looters, but from what appears to be deliberate ceremonial mutilation, shattered faces, severed limbs clustered in specific corridors. These may represent ritual kills of clay soldiers sent to spiritually intercept Eastern threats, their broken bodies absorbing curses meant for the emperor. Perhaps the most telling evidence of Qin's paranoia lies in what he buried with the army and what he didn't. While weapons abound, not a single statue carries a shield. Historical records reveal why. Shields symbolized defensive warfare, a mentality the emperor rejected. His real-world tactics relied on relentless offense, keeping enemies too off balance to strike back. The Terracotta Army follows this philosophy, eternally attacking, never defending, because Qin believed the only true safety lay in crushing threats before they could materialize. Even their hollow interiors might serve a psychological purpose, empty enough to absorb vengeful spirits like sponges, yet solid enough to bar their passage westward toward the tomb. This obsession bled into the artisans' fates. Mass graves near the site contained skeletons with hands fused together from years of repetitive sculpting and skulls crushed by blunt instruments. The message was clear: those who built the emperor's eternal security system couldn't be allowed to undermine it, even accidentally. Every layer of the tomb complex, from the mercury rivers to the clay soldiers, forms a Russian nesting doll of paranoia, each precaution spawning another. The Terracotta Army endures not just as a military marvel, but as archaeology's most elaborate Rorschach test, 8,000 silent witnesses to the price of absolute power, their unblinking eyes reflecting back the terror of the man who commanded them. The Terracotta Army's creation wasn't just artistry, it was ancient China's version of wartime factory production, a logistical ballet executed on a scale that would challenge modern engineers. Walk the excavation site today and you'll stumble over bricks stamped with workshop numbers, shattered kiln walls still blackened by millennia-old fires, and clay fragments bearing the fingerprints of laborers who worked in shifts around the clock. This was no leisurely artistic endeavor. It was an industrial operation with one clear directive: produce immortality on deadline. Forensic archaeologists have pieced together the assembly line's ruthless efficiency. First, artisans rolled clay into thick coils, stacking them like pottery to form hollow torsos, a technique that saved material and prevented cracking during firing. Next came modular limbs mass-produced from molds, arms with pre-carved armor grooves, legs bent at marching angles, even ears categorized into 8 standardized shapes. Workers then hand-sculpted each face over these uniform bases, mixing and matching features like a macabre Mr. Potato Head. Glue marks reveal where noses were swapped last minute, suggesting quality control checks before firing. The final touch, real weapons slotted into hands still soft enough to grip them, their bronze blades leaving telltale impressions in the clay. Kiln sites discovered near Mount Lai tell a story of controlled chaos. Infrared scans show heat signatures of furnaces reaching 1,000 degrees Celsius, hot enough to turn clay into ceramic but low enough to preserve delicate facial details. The true genius lies in the firing sequence. Soldiers were baked upside down to prevent slumping, their hollow bodies acting like chimneys to distribute heat evenly. Yet scorch marks on some statues reveal terrifying shortcuts, figures fired before completely dry, risking explosions that could destroy months of work. This wasn't perfectionism, it was desperation, the kind that comes when an emperor's mortality clock is ticking louder than the kiln's cooling stones. Transportation logistics boggle the mind. Each warrior weighed over 300 pounds, meaning moving 8,000 statues required the equivalent of 600 modern dump trucks worth of haulage. Wheel ruts found near pit entrances suggest sledges dragged statues during rainy seasons when mud lubricated the path. But here's the twist: terracotta's fragility meant most figures were likely assembled on-site from pre-fired modules. Torso fragments bear inventory marks matching Qin Dynasty warehouse records, evidence of a just-in-time delivery system where heads arrived pre-sculpted from one workshop, legs from another, all converging at the tomb like some grotesque IKEA flat-pack project. The assembly process itself was a study in organized chaos. Statues were painted before firing, a backwards technique that locked pigments under the glaze, then touched up with vibrant lacquers after baking. Chemical analysis reveals colors imported from across China: cinnabar red from Hunan, azurite blue from Mongolia, even rare purple extracted from Mediterranean mollusks. Yet beneath this artistry lurked brutal pragmatism. Broken limbs were patched with clay slugs, mismatched hands grafted onto arms, and entire heads reattached with wooden dowels when necks cracked. These weren't museum pieces, they were spiritual appliances built for function over form. What truly chills is the project's timeline. Tree rings from coffin would date most statues to within 5 years of Qin Shi Huang's death, some bearing hurried inscriptions from weeks before his burial. Kiln waste pits contain thousands of failed soldiers, their distorted faces screaming from botched firings, dumped like industrial runoff. This wasn't a decade-long artistic commission. It was a deathbed panic, a scramble to complete an eternal garrison before the emperor's body cooled. The very imperfections, lopsided eyes, asymmetrical armor, become proof of human hands racing against the ultimate deadline. The ultimate clue lies in the clay itself. Mineral signatures trace most statues to local soil, but outliers contain loess from the Yellow River Valley hundreds of miles away. This wasn't just about material sourcing, it was geographical conscription. Just as Qin drafted real soldiers from conquered territories, his afterlife army absorbed clay from every corner of his empire, spiritually binding the land to his tomb. The terracotta warriors aren't just sculptures, they're soil made sentient, earth reshaped into eternal conscripts, their silent ranks standing testament to what happens when absolute power collides with the one force even emperors can't control, time itself. When the first terracotta warriors were unearthed, archaeologists made a heartbreaking discovery. These statues hadn't always been the muted earthen figures we see today. Originally, they blazed with color: vermilion tunics, emerald sashes, indigo armor laces, even gold leaf details sparkling under lacquer finishes. For a fleeting moment after excavation, the world caught glimpses of their true vibrancy until within minutes, the paints curled away like autumn leaves, leaving behind ghostly traces of pigment in the clay. This wasn't just artistic decay, it was the unraveling of a 2,000-year-old code, one where every hue held meaning, every brushstroke whispered secrets about rank, origin, and even the soldiers' souls. The science behind their colors reveals an obsession with permanence. Craftsmen mixed pigments with bone glue, adhesive so strong it could bond paint to ceramic for centuries underground. But their formula had a fatal flaw. Exposure to dry air caused the lacquer layer beneath the paint to dehydrate and curl, taking the colors with it. Infrared imaging shows what the naked eye can no longer see. A general's armor once gleamed with purple, a color so rare it was reserved for celestial beings. Infantrymen wore red, the shade of blood and vitality, while cavalry units sported blue-green, evoking river dragons and swiftness. Even the horses weren't spared this chromatic hierarchy. Those pulling officers' chariots bore black manes, a symbol of authority, while messenger steeds were painted chestnut to mimic the speed of autumn winds. Deeper still lies the spiritual irony. Qin Shi Huang's artisans chose colors not just for visual impact but for their alchemical properties. Cinnabar red, mined from mercury-rich veins, was believed to ward off evil spirits. Malachite green came from the same ore as the Emperor's immortality elixirs. The paints weren't decorative, they were armor for the afterlife, each pigment selected to deflect specific supernatural threats. When these colors faded upon contact with modern air, it wasn't just a conservation tragedy. It was as if the soldiers' spiritual defenses had crumbled, leaving them vulnerable for the first time in millennia. The most haunting evidence comes from fragments preserved by sheer luck. A kneeling archer's sleeve, sheltered under a collapsed clay pillar, retains its ochre hue, the exact shade worn by elite palace guards. A charioteer's belt pressed against bronze fittings still shows flecks of white lead, a pigment so toxic it may have poisoned the artisans who applied it. These accidental time capsules reveal an army far more complex than its monochrome remains suggest. The warriors weren't just individuals in face, they were a kaleidoscope of status and symbolism, their uniforms as meticulously coded as modern military medals. Now consider the decay itself as part of their story. Ancient Chinese philosophies viewed impermanence as sacred, the way autumn leaves fall to nourish spring growth. In this light, the paint's disappearance becomes eerily poetic. The soldiers entered the modern world as they'd entered the afterlife, first in full regalia, then gradually shedding their mortal trappings until only their essence remained. Perhaps this was always their fate, not to stand frozen in time, but to transform, just as the emperor hoped to transcend death. The silent figures before us now, stripped of color, may be closer to their true spiritual forms, no longer facsimiles of living soldiers, but something far more enigmatic guardians who have outlasted even the hues meant to define them. Cutting-edge technology now teases out whispers of their lost brilliance. Laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy detects elemental signatures of pigments long since vanished: mercury from cinnabar, copper from azurite, even traces of gold in officers' hair ornaments. Digital reconstructions show us what written records never could: an army that looked less like baked clay and more like a celestial battalion, its ranks glowing with otherworldly radiance. Yet for all our scientific prowess, something resists replication: the exact interplay of light on lacquer, the way certain colors were layered to create depth, even the faint metallic sheen added to some eyes to mimic life. These weren't just statues, they were illusions of humanity designed to deceive both the living and the dead. Today's conservators face an impossible choice. Reburying the warriors might preserve remaining pigments but seal them away from study. Displaying them ensures their slow fading. In this dilemma, the terracotta army achieves a final, unintended symbolism. They've become a mirror of the emperor's own struggle between permanence and legacy, between staying hidden and being remembered. Their crumbling colors remind us that some secrets aren't meant to last, that even Qin Shi Huang's obsession with eternity couldn't stop time's slow erasure. The soldiers' true hues may be lost, but in their absence they speak louder than ever, not as an army preserved, but as a monument to the futility of trying to conquer decay. Among the ranks of the terracotta army, the horses stand apart, not just as vehicles of war, but as creatures caught mid-motion, their muscles taut, their nostrils flared, as if frozen the moment before a charge. These aren't mere accessories to the clay soldiers, they're masterpieces of anatomical precision, each tendon and vein sculpted with eerie realism. But why did Qin Shi Huang dedicate entire pits to these animals, crafting them with the same devotion as his human warriors? The answer lies in the forgotten language of conquest, where horses weren't just tools. They were the living engines of empire, and their terracotta counterparts held a role far beyond the battlefield. To understand their significance, step back into the chaos of China's warring states period. Qin's rise to power hinged on two innovations: standardized weaponry and a cavalry unmatched in speed and ferocity. Historical records describe horses so vital they were given military ranks. Some even received land grants. These animals weren't livestock, they were elite soldiers, bred from bloodlines traced as meticulously as noble genealogies. When Qin Shi Huang commissioned his afterlife army, replicating these steeds in clay wasn't just practical, it was sacrilege to omit them. Their placement in the pits mirrors real-world cavalry formations, with each chariot unit flanked by riders poised to strike. Yet the horse's symbolism gallops deeper. In Chinese cosmology, horses were celestial messengers believed to carry souls between realms. Ancient texts describe mythical steeds like the Tianma, or heavenly horse, capable of galloping across starfields. The terracotta horse's raised hooves and arched necks suggest more than earthly vigor. They evoke these legendary creatures, as if Qin sought to draft divine couriers into his service. Infrared scans reveal something startling. Some horses were painted with cinnabar red patterns resembling lightning bolts, a motif linked to sky deities. Were these mounts meant to pull the emperor's spirit chariot across the heavens, not just guard his tomb? The pits themselves whisper clues. Unlike the infantry's orderly rows, the horse statues cluster in dynamic groups, some mid-turn, others with heads tossed back. Their arrangement mirrors a cavalry maneuver described in Qin military manuals, the swirling cloud formation, designed to encircle enemies. But here's the twist: these horses face all four cardinal directions, not just east like the soldiers. This wasn't tactical oversight, it was spiritual strategy. In death as in life, the emperor needed steeds versatile enough to charge into any realm, earthly or supernatural. Forensic evidence unveils even darker layers. Soil samples from around the horse's hooves contain traces of burned barley and millet, remnants of ritual offerings. Ancient horse cults, particularly among northern steppe tribes Qin had conquered, practiced spirit feeding, sacrificing grain to empower steeds for the afterlife. The terracotta horses may have been recipients of similar rites, their hollow bellies symbolically filled with sustenance for eternal campaigns. More chilling are the skeletons found nearby, real horses buried alive in groups of 12, their legs bound in bronze chains. These weren't mere sacrifices, they were relays, a flesh and blood cavalry waiting to be summoned should the clay army falter. The most haunting detail lies in the horse's eyes. While the soldier's gazes are uniformly forward, the horse's pupils roll sideways, as if startled by something just out of frame. Art historians note this technique appears nowhere else in ancient Chinese sculpture. Was it artistic license or something more unsettling? Han Dynasty scrolls describe nightmares where dead warriors' horses watch the unseen, their wide eyes tracking malevolent spirits invisible to humans. The terracotta steed's skewed gazes might be no accident, but a deliberate warning that in the afterlife, dangers lurk beyond mortal sight, and even the Emperor's celestial cavalry must stay vigilant. Today, as conservators painstakingly reassemble shattered horse statues, their legs often broken from collapsed pit ceilings, they uncover secrets Qin never intended to be revealed. Some torsos contain clay tablets inscribed with star charts, as if mapping celestial patrol routes. Others hide compartments in their chests, empty now but perhaps once holding tokens of speed, falcon feathers perhaps, or mercury-dipped arrowheads. Each discovery peels back another layer, revealing not just an emperor's vanity, but his desperate bargain with forces even he couldn't control. The horses endure as silent witnesses to this pact, their hooves forever suspended mid-stride, caught between the dust of conquest and the shadows of whatever frontier lies beyond. Beneath the dust of centuries, hidden in the crevices of armor or tucked behind a terracotta warrior's belt, lie faint scratches that most visitors never notice names. Not of generals or kings, but of the forgotten hands that shaped these immortal soldiers. To date, archaeologists have uncovered over 80 such inscriptions, each a fleeting signature of the artisans who worked under the whip and watch of Qin Shi Huang's imperial workshops. These aren't the elegant calligraphy of court scribes, they're hurried etchings, some no larger than a grain of rice, as if the workers risked punishment just to leave their mark. But was this mere vanity or something far more profound? The answer may lie in the way these names intertwine with China's oldest spiritual traditions. Take the case of warrior number 263. Beneath his stone armor plates, conservators found two characters, Gong Jiang, literally artisan Jiang. At first glance, it seems like a simple maker's mark, but compare it to Shang Dynasty oracle bone scripts and a pattern emerges. On those ancient divination texts, craftsmen often inscribed their names not just as records, but as spiritual binding, a way to tether their essence to the object they created. Jiang's name wasn't just claiming credit, it was embedding his soul into the clay, ensuring he'd accompany the emperor into eternity as more than a laborer, but as part of the celestial guard itself. Then there's the mystery of repetition. In Pit 3, 7 different warriors bear the inscription Xianyong City Workshop, followed by a number. These aren't names, but addresses, coordinates in an underworld bureaucracy. The numbers correspond to Qin Dynasty penal codes, suggesting these statues were produced by convict laborers working off sentences. But here's where it gets eerie. The same numbering system appears on oracle bones used to communicate with ancestors. Were these markings more than workshop ID? Could they have been ritual tags designating which souls were assigned to which posts in the afterlife? The most haunting examples defy mere functionality. One cavalryman's thigh bears not a name but a plea, "May the earth remember me." Another, hidden inside a general's hollow torso, reads, "10 generations of safety for my house." These aren't artisan signatures, they're prayers cast into clay, echoing the practice of writing spells on ghost money burned at funerals. The soldiers' inscriptions mirror this tradition, words meant not for the living but for the judges of the underworld, bureaucrats who'd supposedly honor these promises in exchange for service. Modern imaging technology reveals even subtler layers. Some names were written in ink that seeped into the unfired clay, then deliberately obscured under layers of paint. Were these stealthy acts of rebellion or sacred concealment, like Taoist talismans hidden in temple walls? The contrast with oracle bones is telling. Where Shang inscriptions were public, carved for kings and ancestors to see, the terracotta messages are intimate, hidden, as if the artisans knew only the clay itself would bear witness. Perhaps the most poignant discovery came in 2019, when a broken statue's base yielded not characters but fingerprints, the swirls and walls of the sculptor's left thumb pressed into wet clay. Nearby, barely visible, were the words, "I too am standing guard." In that moment, 2,000 years collapsed. This wasn't just a worker leaving his mark. It was a human reaching across time, asserting that even the smallest hands played a role in eternity. The terracotta army's true power may lie not in its grandeur, but in these silent whispers, proof that immortality isn't just for emperors, but for every soul daring enough to etch their name into history. Buried beneath the weight of history, the terracotta army may be just the visible tip of an unimaginable subterranean empire, a shadow capital carved from earth and ambition. Recent ground-penetrating scans reveal the warriors stand guard over a sprawling necropolis that doesn't merely imitate Qin Shi Huang's palaces and cities, it replicates them with terrifying precision. Imagine streets of packed earth mirroring the avenues of the ancient capital Xianyang, courtyards aligned to the same celestial coordinates as the imperial court, even drainage systems engineered to mimic the yellow river's flow. This wasn't a tomb, it was an entire political geography transplanted underground, a bureaucratic afterlife where the emperor's authority would remain unchallenged by time or rebellion. The parallels with other ancient subterranean cities are uncanny. Beneath Turkey's Derinkuyu, 18 levels of tunnels housed 20,000 people, not just for shelter, but as a fully functional mirrored society with stables, temples, and wineries. In Egypt's Valley of the Kings, the pharaohs built duplicate houses of eternity, stocked with spiritual duplicates of earthly possessions. But Qin's underground capital dwarfs them all in both scale and intent. Where others sought refuge or ritual, his complex was designed as a functional administrative hub. Excavations have uncovered terracotta scribes clutching bamboo slips, chariots outfitted with document cases, even statues of bureaucrats frozen mid-census, all positioned according to real-world ministerial protocols. What chills the bones isn't just the replication, but the distortion. The necropolis exaggerates key features like a warped reflection. Palaces described in historical texts as having 9 courtyards appear here with 11, an intentional overcorrection to outdo cosmic balance. Rivers of mercury flow faster than their earthly counterparts, as if the underworld required intensified vitality. Most telling are the empty pits archaeologists initially dismissed as unfinished, until they realized these voids precisely match the locations of prisons and execution grounds in Xianyang. The emperor didn't just copy his capital, he edited reality itself, removing elements that might threaten his eternal rule while amplifying symbols of control. The warrior's role in this mirrored world becomes clearer when you examine their positioning. They garrison near what would have been the Ministry of War in the surface capital, their formation duplicating the defense protocols of living imperial guards. Infrared scans show their weapons point toward sectors corresponding to historically rebellious provinces, a celestial occupation force maintaining order in the afterlife. Even their production lines reflect real-world logistics. Kiln sites cluster around the necropolis's replica armories, while pottery workshops align with the Ministry of Work's underground counterpart. Every soldier wasn't just a statue, but a civil servant in Qin's bureaucratic underworld, their clay bodies stamped with the same efficiency that standardized axle widths and script characters across the living empire. Perhaps the most revealing discovery came in 2018, when radar detected a massive rectangular chamber beneath the emperor's burial mound, its dimensions matching the hall of heavenly purity where he held court. Soil tests revealed mercury concentrations 30 times higher than surrounding areas, exactly as ancient texts described his throne rooms, rivers of shimmering metal. The terracotta army's eastward orientation now makes dreadful sense. They weren't facing earthly threats, but standing at attention toward their sovereign's eternal seat of power, awaiting orders that would never come. This mirrored capital theory reshapes everything we thought we knew. Those aren't just pits of soldiers, they're ministry offices in a necropolis that functioned like a spiritual hard drive, backing up the Empire's operating system for eternity. The missing weapons, possibly redistributed to armories in other subterranean districts, the acrobats, entertainers for the Emperor's everlasting court banquets. Even the horses take on new meaning, not just cavalry, but the transportation network of a ghostly bureaucracy. Qin didn't build a tomb, he engineered an afterlife coup, seizing control of death itself by transplanting his entire governmental machinery beneath the earth, with 8,000 terracotta enforcers ensuring the revolution stuck. Yet for all its grandeur, the underground capital bears one glaring omission: there are no statues of the people. No clay farmers tilling fields, no merchants crowding markets, no children playing in replica alleyways. The message is as stark as the empty pits. This wasn't a democracy of the dead, but the Empire's skeleton stripped of flesh. The terracotta army stands guard over a ghostly parody of power, where the only citizens were bureaucrats, soldiers, and the hollow-eyed emperor himself, a puppet ruler in a kingdom of dust and echoes, forever rehearsing a play with no audience but time. The terracotta army's sheer realism, the individualized faces, the precise military formations, even the stitching on stone armor, has inevitably sparked wild speculation. Could these statues be evidence of lost ancient technology or even extraterrestrial influence? It's a tantalizing thought, especially when you consider that no other civilization at the time was producing life-sized sculptures with such anatomical precision. But before we entertain visitors from another world, let's ground ourselves in the remarkable yet entirely human ingenuity behind these clay warriors. Take the modular construction technique. Each soldier was assembled from standardized parts: torsos, limbs, heads, mass-produced like ancient pottery before being customized by hand. This wasn't alien engineering, it was the birth of assembly line manufacturing centuries before Henry Ford. The kilns used to fire the statues were technological marvels in their own right, capable of maintaining precise temperatures through carefully designed airflow systems. And those eerily accurate bronze weapons, they reflect Qin-era metallurgical advancements like chromium plating to prevent rust, a technique Europe wouldn't rediscover until the 20th century. The extraterrestrial theory often hinges on the army's sudden appearance in the archaeological record, as if such artistry materialized overnight, but recent discoveries have filled in the gaps. Small, crude terracotta figures from earlier Qin tombs show a clear evolution toward realism. A workshop site near Xi'an revealed trial statues with mismatched proportions, proof of artisans experimenting with scale. Even the vibrant paints, now mostly faded, used locally sourced minerals like cinnabar and azurite. Every mystery has a terrestrial explanation, just not always the one we expect. Where the theories truly unravel is in the imperfections. Close inspection shows asymmetry in ear placements, fingerprints pressed haphazardly into wet clay, even occasional repair patches where limbs cracked during firing. These aren't the hallmarks of advanced alien tech, they're the struggles of human craftsmen working under immense pressure. The warriors' hollow torsos, often cited as evidence of lightweight, otherworldly materials, were actually a practical solution to prevent explosions in the kiln. Yet the most compelling rebuttal lies in the workforce itself. Inscriptions on bricks name over 80 artisan groups, while skeletal remains near the site show signs of repetitive stress injuries from sculpting. Mass graves contain the bones of these laborers alongside their tools, chisels, awls, even miniature clay models used as references. This was a human endeavor, paid for in blood and sweat, not bestowed by celestial visitors. That said, the speculation isn't entirely baseless. The army's existence does parallel global, out-of-place artifact mysteries, like Egypt's precision-crafted granite sarcophagi or the Antikythera mechanism's gears. What makes the Terracotta warriors different is the paper trail, administrative records detailing material shipments, workshop quotas, even penalties for defective statues. The truth is remarkable enough. An emperor's obsession fused with China's bureaucratic genius to produce something so ahead of its time, it still fools us into seeing magic where there was only mastery. Perhaps the real lesson here isn't about aliens or lost tech, but about underestimating ancient innovation. The same culture that standardized weights and measures across a continent, built roads with drainage systems, and engineered crossbow triggers with interchangeable parts was more than capable of sculpting lifelike armies. The Terracotta warriors challenge us not because they defy explanation, but because they force us to reckon with how much history's dark ages might simply be gaps in our own understanding. Their uncanny realism isn't a puzzle, it's a mirror, reflecting back our own tendency to mythologize what we can't immediately comprehend. So next time you see a theory about ancient astronauts whispering secrets to Qin's artisans, remember the fingerprints left in clay, the kiln scars on discarded statues, the names scratched inside armor plates. The Terracotta army's true marvel isn't that it might be extraterrestrial, it's that it's so profoundly, undeniably human. Today, the silence of the Terracotta army is broken not by the clatter of ancient weapons, but by the whispers of living devotees pressing joss sticks into the earth. What archaeologists treat as an excavation site has become, for many locals, something far more profound, a conduit between worlds where the past isn't studied so much as communed with. Walk the pits at dawn, and you might spot incense smoke curling around a general's clay shoulders, or oranges placed carefully at the feet of a kneeling archer. These aren't acts of vandalism, they're rituals reaching back to traditions older than the warriors themselves, a reminder that 2,000 years haven't dulled the human instinct to speak to the unseen. The offerings tell their own story. Alongside typical tourist trinkets, conservators have found handwritten prayers folded into tiny squares and tucked into statue crevices, pleas for health, harvests, even exam success scrawled on red paper. One elderly farmer caught leaving millet cakes in Pit 2 explained matter-of-factly, "The soldiers are still on duty, they must be fed." His words echo Tang Dynasty texts describing spirit meals left for guardian statues outside tombs. The irony is palpable. Qin Shi Huang's attempt to control eternity has instead birthed a living folk practice beyond his grasp, where the very soldiers meant to serve him now receive devotion as numinous beings in their own right. This blurring of archaeology and spirituality reaches its peak during Qingming Festival, when thousands descend on the site to sweep the tombs of their ancestors, including, remarkably, the Terracotta warriors. Families bring miniature paper uniforms to burn, believing the smoke will clothe the soldiers in the afterlife. Teenagers leave silk sashes tied in complex knots, replicating Qin military insignia as described in excavated bamboo slips. Even the site's caretakers participate discreetly. One guard admitted to rotating statues facing the rising sun during solstices, so they remember time still moves. Such practices walk a delicate line, officially discouraged, yet tacitly tolerated as part of China's intangible cultural heritage. The most poignant rituals remain invisible to most visitors. In nearby Lintong village, where descendants of those first farmers still live, elders perform an annual greeting ceremony at their family shrines. Clay fragments from the excavation accidentally carried home on shoes decades ago are washed in rice wine and wrapped in red cloth, treated as sacred relics. These are not just broken pottery, one village historian insists. They carry the breath of the men who shaped them, Modern 3D printed replicas sold in gift shops have inadvertently fueled this belief. Some locals secretly feed them drops of water or liquor, whispering names recovered from ancient workshop inscriptions. Science and superstition collide most dramatically in the conservation labs. When a statue's paint begins flaking, technicians often find tiny coins or beans slipped beneath detached fragments. Visitors attempt to pay the warriors for their lost colors. One restorer recounted discovering a child's baby tooth wedged into a cavalry horse's broken hoof, a folk remedy repurposed to heal the ceramic. The labs themselves have become unintentional shrines. Workers report that analytical equipment frequently malfunctions near statues bearing artisans' fingerprints, as if the clay itself resists being interrogated by modern tools. What emerges is a paradox. The more we uncover about the terracotta army's original purpose, the more layers of meaning accrue like strata. A soldier crafted to suppress rebellion might now be petitioned for protection by a shopkeeper. A chariot designed for celestial warfare becomes a magnet for fertility charms. The site's unofficial caretakers, from the woman who sweeps dust from statues' eyes every morning to the veteran who salutes each officer figure, have woven Qin's grand design into the fabric of daily life, transforming a monument to control into something far more democratic, a mirror for hopes no emperor could command. Perhaps the final twist lies in the offerings never removed. Between scheduled cleanings, conservators occasionally spot fresh fruit or flowers placed with such care they go unnoticed for days. No one claims responsibility. The gifts simply appear as if the site itself generates them. In these quiet moments, the terracotta army ceases to be an archaeological wonder and becomes what it perhaps always was, a village of sorts where the living and the dead keep watch over each other, bound by rituals no edict could erase. The warriors may have been built to serve one man's ambition, but their true legacy lies in the hands that still reach out to them, leaving not just offerings but proof that some guardianships outlast even eternity. The 21st century has peeled back layers of the terracotta army's secrets with tools Qin Shi Huang's alchemists could never have imagined: lasers, spectral imaging, and DNA sequencing that transform clay and pigment into living history. In 2012, conservators working on a cracked infantryman's torso made a startling find: microscopic fibers embedded in the terracotta, preserved for millennia in the cool, dry darkness. Analysis revealed these to be silk, not from burial wrappings as once assumed, but from delicate shrouds that once covered the statues' faces. This changes everything. Historical records describe Qin dynasty funerary rites where the dead were sealed away from heaven's gaze. But applying this to terracotta suggests the warriors weren't just soldiers, but ritual surrogates undergoing their own symbolic burial. The silk's weave pattern matches fragments found in high-ranking tombs, implying each soldier received honors befitting an imperial guard's funeral. Even more revelatory are the pigments trapped beneath those shrouds. Advanced hyperspectral imaging in 2019 detected organic compounds mixed into the paint, not just minerals but egg whites, animal fats, even traces of human breast milk. Forensic anthropologists recognize these from contemporary medicinal texts as spirit-binding ingredients believed to animate effigies. The implications are profound. These statues weren't merely art, they were alchemical vessels, their colors blended to spiritually feed the clay beings. Some conservators now suspect the notorious mercury rivers weren't just for show. They may have served as conductive channels for these rituals, with the liquid metal acting as a supernatural electrolyte. The human story behind the army grows richer with each DNA study. Skeletal remains from artisans' mass graves sequenced in 2021 revealed a genetic mosaic, not just Han Chinese, but markers linking to Siberian, Southeast Asian, and even Mediterranean populations. This aligns with clay analysis showing some statues contain volcanic ash from Korea's Baekdu mountain, while others bear loess from the Tibetan plateau. The terracotta army was quite literally molded from the empire's farthest reaches, its creation a multicultural endeavor that mirrors Qin's unification of warring states. Groundbreaking work in isotope analysis adds another layer. By studying oxygen and strontium ratios in the warrior's teeth, yes, many have detailed molars hidden behind closed lips. Scientists trace the clay sources to 7 distinct quarry sites. Each pit statues cluster by material origin, suggesting workshops were assigned by regiment. Pit 3's officers, for example, come from a single quarry near Xianyong's imperial palace, their clay mixed with powdered jade, a privilege reflecting their high status. Meanwhile, cavalry horses show traces of straw from the northern steppes, their terracotta blended with horsehair for spiritual potency. Perhaps the most haunting discovery came from residue analysis on the warrior's hands. Mass spectrometry detected proteins found in human blood on sword grips and crossbow triggers. This wasn't from battle wounds. The patterns suggest ceremonial anointing, likely during the statue's activation rituals. Combined with newly deciphered workshop inscriptions that mention the breath of life ceremonies, we're glimpsing a terrifying spiritual arms race, an emperor not just preparing for the afterlife, but engineering a clay legion capable of waging eternal war. Modern technology has even resurrected the army's lost voices. In 2023, acoustical engineers mapped the hollow chambers inside soldiers' torsos, discovering they resonate at frequencies that amplify specific tones. When simulated, the statues produce eerie harmonic vibrations at the exact pitch described in Qin dynasty military drums. These weren't silent sentinels, they were designed to sing in unison when wind passed through the pits, creating a ghostly battle chant to terrify tomb raiders and restless spirits alike. The ultimate revelation may lie in what hasn't been found. Despite excavating over 2,000 warriors, archaeologists have uncovered 0 female figures except one. Tucked among the acrobats in Pit 7 stands a solitary statue with delicate features and a slender frame, her robe painted with lotus motifs traditionally worn by female shamans. Her presence hints at a hidden dimension to the army's purpose, not just military might, but a spiritual continuum where genders held distinct cosmic roles. As laser scanners peer deeper into unexplored pits, who knows what other surprises these clay battalions still guard? The scientific revolution surrounding the terracotta army proves one thing. Qin Shi Huang's greatest achievement wasn't cheating death, but ensuring his mysteries would outlive us all. The gleaming showcases of Paris, London, and New York hold fragments of the terracotta army, a general's head here, a cavalryman's hand there, displayed as exotic treasures while their headless comrades stand in Xi'an. These scattered pieces ignite one of archaeology's fiercest modern battles. Who truly owns the past? The controversy began in the early 20th century when looters and colonial collectors smuggled fragments overseas, their origins obscured by vague paperwork. Today, museums like the British Museum defend their collections as cultural ambassadors, while China demands their return, arguing these warriors were never meant to be amputated from their legion. At the heart of the conflict lies a painful irony. Many Western institutions acquired terracotta pieces during the chaotic 1920s, when warlords ruled China and archaeological sites were pillaged with impunity. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Kneeling Archer, for instance, was purchased in 1924 from a dealer who listed its provenance simply as Northern China. Yet modern forensics tell a different story. Soil traces on its base match the exact chemistry of Pit 2's flooring. This isn't just about missing paperwork, it's about entire chapters of history ripped from their context. Legal arguments twist like the warrior's braided hair. Some museums cite UNESCO 1970 convention which prohibits trafficking in cultural artifacts but exclude pieces acquired before that date. Others propose shared stewardship, offering long-term loans while retaining ownership. For Chinese officials, these compromises ring hollow. They point to the Acrobat statue in Berlin's Asian Art Museum, separated from its troupe in Pit 7. You wouldn't display Mona Lisa's smile in Paris and her hands in Rome, argues one cultural minister. Why is our heritage treated differently? The debate exposes deeper scars of colonialism. Many terracotta fragments entered Western collections during the Century of Humiliation, when foreign powers carved up China under unequal treaties. A cavalry horse's head in the Louvre, for example, was acquired by a French diplomat in 1908, the same year foreign troops looted Beijing's Summer Palace. For China, reclaiming these pieces isn't just about archaeology, it's about rectifying historical injustices, yet some scholars propose a middle path. The Digital Repatriation Project at Chicago's Field Museum uses 3D scans to virtually reunite warriors with their original pits, allowing visitors to see fragments in context via augmented reality. Meanwhile, Switzerland recently returned a smuggled officer's head after forensic proof linked it to a specific pit soil composition. These cases suggest collaboration, not confrontation, may heal the fractures. The warriors themselves become silent witnesses to this struggle. Their hollow eyes once stared down cosmic threats, now they gaze across geopolitical divides. Perhaps their greatest legacy isn't in the clay, but in the conversations they force us to have about who controls history and whether artifacts can ever truly be home when separated from the land that shaped them. As more fragments trickle back to Xi'an, each reunion offers hope that even the most broken armies can be made whole again. Beneath the guarded gates of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum, the greatest archaeological gamble of the century looms, a choice between preserving history and pursuing truth. While the terracotta army's pits have been meticulously excavated, the emperor's central burial chamber remains sealed, a tantalizing vault of potential discoveries from star maps etched on ceilings to rivers of liquid mercury still flowing after millennia. But unlocking these secrets isn't just about digging deeper. It's a race to develop technology sophisticated enough to explore without destroying. Enter muon tomography, a cutting-edge imaging technique that uses cosmic rays to map subterranean voids with startling precision. Recent scans reveal anomalies that defy explanation: a floating sarcophagus-like structure, geometric chambers with no visible entrances, and metallic concentrations matching ancient descriptions of bronze celestial models. Yet even this space-age tool has limits. Muons can't distinguish between a bronze artifact and a vein of ore, leaving scientists to wonder. Is that dense mass at the tomb's heart the emperor's fabled mercury-powered throne, or just a mineral deposit? The ethical debate simmers beneath every technological breakthrough. Chinese cultural authorities enforce a strict no-excavation policy for the inner tomb, citing both reverence for the dead and the disastrous consequences of past haste. When workers first uncovered the terracotta army in the 1970s, their painted surfaces crumbled within hours of exposure to modern air. Today's conservators fear the central tomb's silks, lacquers, and organic relics could suffer far worse. But the counterargument burns equally bright. What if the chamber holds bamboo scrolls documenting lost philosophies from Qin's infamous book burnings, or medical texts with remedies predating Hippocrates? The dilemma echoes Ötzi the Iceman's discovery, an intact Paleolithic body so perfectly preserved, researchers could analyze his last meal and even the bacteria in his gut. Yet every incision into his tissue erased irreplaceable data. The question isn't just what we might find in Qin's tomb, but what we're willing to lose in the process. Planned excavations skirt the moral minefield by targeting peripheral sites. Later this year, archaeologists will open Pit 4, a long-dormant trench rumored to hold terracotta bureaucrats frozen mid-administration, their bamboo strip ledgers possibly detailing the empire's tax rolls or military deployments. Meanwhile, drone-mounted LiDAR scans recently identified an underground network near the tomb's northeast corner, possibly housing the emperor's fabled zoo of exotic beasts. Ancient texts mention rhinoceros and elephant statues. If found, they could rewrite our understanding of Qin-era trade with Southeast Asia. But the most audacious project involves passive sensors buried around the tomb's perimeter, silently logging temperature, humidity, and gas fluctuations. Like doctors monitoring a coma patient, researchers hope these devices will detect seasonal shifts in the Mercury River's flow, clues to whether the tomb's alchemical machinery still functions. The wild card in this high-stakes game, artificial intelligence, teams at Tsinghua University are training neural networks to reconstruct fragmented artifacts digitally before physical restoration begins. Their crowning achievement so far, virtually reassembling a warrior's shattered face using just 17 ceramic fragments, a process that once took conservators months. Other algorithms pore over excavation records, cross-referencing soil samples with historical texts to predict where undiscovered pits might lie. One tantalizing lead points southwest of the main complex, where ground-penetrating radar detected rectangular voids aligned with constellations significant in Qin astrology, perhaps a hidden observatory or even a backup tomb designed to deceive grave robbers. Amid these technological leaps, a quieter revolution brews in the labs. Molecular archaeology now allows scientists to extract DNA from the faintest traces pollen embedded in statue crevices, skin cells preserved in bronze weapon grips. Preliminary findings already upend assumptions. Residue on a general's sword suggests he was left-handed, while pollen grains in Pit 5 reveal soldiers stood amidst juniper trees, likely part of a funerary garden. Next-generation sequencing could soon identify individual artisans through tool marks or even reconstruct the emperor's microbiome from tomb soil. But here, too, ethics intrude. Should we sequence Qin Shi Huang's DNA if his remains are found? The question divides scholars, with some arguing it's a scientific imperative and others warning of cultural exploitation or even attempts to clone the emperor by rogue actors. What makes this moment so electrifying is the convergence of patience and opportunity. For decades, the technology didn't exist to explore the tomb without ruining it. Now, we're nearing an inflection point where non-invasive tools might soon reveal nearly as much as physical excavation, muon scans sharpening to millimeter resolution, AI predicting artifact locations with 95% accuracy. Yet the greatest discovery may be philosophical rather than physical. However advanced our machines become, the tomb's ultimate lesson might be about restraint, recognizing that some mysteries aren't puzzles to be solved, but bridges between past and present that must be walked with care. The Terracotta Army's silent vigil continues, their unblinking eyes now turned toward a new generation of explorers armed not with shovels, but with questions that resonate deeper than any radar pulse. 2,000 years after their creation, the Terracotta Army still guards its secrets as fiercely as it once shielded its emperor. Was this a spiritual strike force assembled to conquer the afterlife? A psychological weapon designed to terrify rebellious souls? An alchemical experiment to distill immortality from clay and mercury? Or something even stranger, a mirrored bureaucracy meant to administer an eternal empire beneath the earth? The truth may lie in the spaces between these theories, in the fingerprints pressed into wet clay by artisans whose names were only beginning to recover. Consider the contradictions. These warriors were built with hyper-realistic individuality, yet produced on an industrial scale. They faced east toward celestial threats, but their weapons were systematically removed to prevent rebellion. Their paint was vibrant enough to mimic life, yet hidden forever in darkness. Such paradoxes suggest Qin Shi Huang's vision transcended simple categorization. His clay legion wasn't just an army, but a multifaceted tool for bending reality itself. Modern archaeology adds layers to the mystery. Soil analysis reveals mercury pathways connecting the warriors to the unopened tomb like veins carrying poison and power. Infrared scans show heat anomalies where no chambers should exist, hinting at undiscovered pits filled with who knows what. Even the statue's hollow interiors might have functioned as resonance chambers, designed to amplify ritual chants into a chorus meant to shake the heavens. With every technological advance, we peel back another wrapping only to find the enigma growing deeper. So where does this leave us? Perhaps the most compelling insight isn't about the army's purpose, but about the man who commanded its creation. A ruler so consumed by paranoia that he weaponized the afterlife. A visionary whose terror of oblivion birthed one of humanity's most astonishing artistic achievements. A paradox who standardized weights, measures, and even thoughts across his empire, yet commissioned 8,000 unique faces to serve him beyond death. Now we turn to you, yes, you standing at the edge of this mystery with us. Which theory feels closest to the truth? Do you see these clay soldiers as celestial guardians, psychological chess pieces, or something beyond our modern frameworks? The comments are your excavation site. Dig in, share your perspective, and let's unravel this together. And if your curiosity isn't buried yet, hit that subscribe button, because history's greatest enigmas are waiting for us to unearth them one mind at a time.